A bare section of land lies where a shelter belt of trees once rooted. The trees had been burned to the ground, leaving the soil barren and animals with a limited amount of food and no places at home. Over the next couple months, wind and rain had greatly eroded the soil and caused flooding nearby. The erosion and flooding could have been prevented if trees and grass would have been replanted after the accidental fire, but no one decided to take the initiative. This shelter belt once provided for a surplus of variant animals, but without it, the animals were forced to leave or fight for the remaining. Predators began to raid farmhouse dumpsters, leaving a mess and angry citizens. The lack of food for the herbivores had resulted in the lack of food for the predators. The burnt and barren land had caused erosion, flooding, and drastic changes in the animal food chain. Wildlife and soil conservation can almost directly affect everything around us. Hi, my name is Desiree, and I'm a sophomore at Gregory High School. My grandfather is a farmer and runs his own hunting service right here in South Dakota. His knowledge of conservation management and care for conservation has greatly influenced me to teach others about the importance of conservation and how it can benefit us dramatically. You're probably wondering what conservation has to do with benefiting us. The answer is just about everything. It takes thousands of years for nutrient-rich topsoil to be produced naturally by nature. Certain nutrients are derived from the soil by certain crops. Crop rotation, the practice of growing a series of dissimilar types of crops in a certain area during sequential seasons, allows these nutrients to be somewhat maintained and restored. Leaving grass and corn stalks in the soil after harvesting can positively affect the soil as well. Almost every day in the Midwest, the wind seems to blow. Soil can easily be blown away and eroded if nothing is there to keep it in place. Roots of grass, old crops, trees, and even strips of weeds can help prevent soil from blowing away and suffering wind erosion. This prevention leads to better crop production and larger amounts of food for wildlife. How about trees? What do trees do in the environment? Trees clean our CO2 of carbon dioxide and recycle it back out as oxygen. Shelter belts, plantations usually made up of one or more rows of trees or shrubs, give a variety of animals a place to feel secure. Animals make homes in these shelter belts for the wind protection and shelter these trees provide. Shelter belts can also serve as snow barriers. For example, if a shelter belt runs from north to south and a blizzard blows from the west, the east side of the shelter belt will have a tremendously reduced amount of snow compared to the west side. This is helpful to ranchers who want a haven available for their cattle and calves during these harsh weather conditions. Shade is also a benefit of trees, especially when those hot weather days come around. Berries and nuts, those food sources to some animal species, can be supplied by select trees found in these plantations. Trees do a great job of absorbing up excess water too. The absorbing keeps soil moist and prevents erosion and flooding. Water, just like wind, can easily pick up topsoil and erode it if nothing is there to keep it in place. Although water can be the culprit to erosion, it also needs to be conserved. Dams, springs, streams, and rivers need proper care and management too. Testing of fish populations and pH levels are basic examples. Making sure minimal amounts of pesticides seep into these water sources is very important as well. Being knowledgeable about conservation and understanding the importance of it will greatly affect how life will be in 10, 20, and in 50 years. Knowing what wildlife like and how to organize when planting makes a big difference too. Teaching and informing people about conservation should be a part of American life. Instructing the basics of conservation to younger generations will be our future. Conservation is precious and can easily be harmed if not managed properly. Animals depend on conservation, and humans do too. Farmers harvest crops that make up the food we buy in stores. People depend on livestock, and livestock depends on what is harvested. Fish and every other animal species depends on water. Our water may not come directly from these sources that fish and wildlife depend on, but water from these sources can soak into water tables that we depend on. Conservation is a cycle that every living thing is dependable upon. In conclusion, conservation is the protecting and managing of air, land, water, and wildlife. If one part of an ecosystem falls out of balance, other parts of the ecosystem are very likely to be negatively affected as well. Also, it is very important to teach and understand how we can improve and carry out conservation methods. Our actions today will determine how and what things will be like tomorrow. Thank you.
Imagine a world without water. Our planet would be a dry, dusty, desert-like place unable to support life. Thankfully, that's not the case though, and the Earth has several sources of water. However, while the Earth is covered three-fourths by water, 97.2% of it is salt water, with only 2.8% being freshwater. That's an extremely small percentage to sustain 6.8 billion people, and it has been estimated that by 2030, there will be 8.3 billion mouths to feed. The world gets its food supply from agriculture, and in order for agriculture to be able to keep up with the growing demands, farmers are going to need a lot of water for their crops. A recent projection from CHS Cooperative has indicated that agriculture will produce 300 bushels of corn per acre by 2030, with 12 billion more bushels produced every year. But in order for agriculture to be productive, it also